The heart monitor's rhythmic beeping suddenly flatlined into a single, endless tone. Emily collapsed to her knees on the hospital floor, her wedding dress pooling around her like a sea of broken promises. Through tear-blurred vision, she looked up at Jake, the man she'd dismissed as just a janitor, now standing there in an expensive suit, holding authorization papers for an experimental treatment that could save her mother's life. "You lied." "To me," she whispered, her voice breaking. "I gave up everything for you," he answered, his scarred hands trembling as he reached toward her. "My fortune, my name, my pride, just to keep the one promise that mattered." The merciless fluorescent lights of Massachusetts General Hospital cast ghastly shadows across Sarah Bennett's hollow face, making her appear already half in the grave. The rhythmic, mechanical symphony of medical equipment pierced Emily's soul. Each beep, each hiss of oxygen a countdown to an inevitable goodbye. The antiseptic smell burned Emily's nostrils, mixing with the unmistakable scent of decay that no amount of hospital-grade cleaners could mask. Sarah's breath rattled in her chest like coins in a tin can, her once sparkling emerald eyes, so like Emily's own, now sunken into bruised sockets, the whites yellowed from the cancer devouring her from within. Her lips, cracked and bleeding despite Emily's hourly applications of balm, parted with visible effort. "Emmy?" Sarah gasped, the word barely a whisper in the sterile room. The effort sent her into a coughing fit, flecks of blood appearing on the tissue Emily hurriedly pressed to her mother's mouth. "Please, come closer." Emily's heart hammered against her ribs as she leaned in, taking her mother's skeletal hand between her own. The skin felt like parchment left too long in the sun, translucent enough to trace every blue-green vein beneath, a map of a journey nearly complete. "I need you to promise me something," Sarah wheezed, each syllable a battle against her failing body. Her fingers suddenly clutched Emily's with surprising, desperate strength, nails digging crescents into her daughter's flesh. "The most important thing I'll ever ask of you." A machine shrieked an urgent warning, the sound slicing through Emily like a blade. A nurse rushed in, face grim, adjusting tubes and pressing buttons with practiced efficiency. She left with that look, that horrible, pitying look that Emily had come to dread. It screamed what no one would say aloud. "Tonight's the night. She won't see another sunrise." "Anything, Mum," Emily choked out, her throat constricting around the words. Tears burned, trails down her cheeks dripping onto their clasped hands. "Just please save your strength." "No." Sarah's voice rose with startling intensity, her back arching slightly off the bed. "This cannot wait." The violence of her mother's reaction sent Emily reeling back, memories flashing through her mind with brutal clarity. Her father hurling accusations as he packed his bags, the gleam of malice in his eyes as he'd told Sarah she was damaged goods he never wanted. Her mother's body crumpling to the kitchen floor like a marionette with cut strings. The sickening revelation that he'd only married Sarah for her grandmother's small inheritance, fleeing like a thief in the night when the money ran dry, and Sarah's first diagnosis arrived with merciless finality. "You must swear to me," Sarah continued, her eyes suddenly blazing with feverish intensity, tears streaming unchecked down her hollow cheeks. "Swear you'll never, ever settle for less than true love, that you'll only marry someone who loves you completely." Her breath hitched with a wet, horrifying sound. "Someone who won't abandon you when your body betrays you, when money runs out, when life gets unbearable." Emily's entire body shook uncontrollably, her vision blurring. "Mum, please don't do this. Swear it!" Sarah's voice rose to a desperate scream that sent monitors into a frenzy of beeping. She fumbled weakly at the bedside table. On Grandma's Bible, "Swear it before God." The ancient black Bible felt impossibly heavy in Emily's trembling hands, as if weighted with generations of women's tears. The leather binding was worn smooth at the corners, pages yellowed with age and marked with decades of feminine fingerprints, grandmothers, mothers, daughters, all connected by this book and the prayers whispered over it. "I swear," Emily sobbed, placing her palm on the cracked cover, feeling the embossed cross beneath her skin. "I swear I'll only marry someone who truly loves me, who'll stay through sickness and poverty." Her voice cracked into pieces. "Who'll love me the way you loved me, even when everyone else walked away." The heart monitor erupted into a chaotic, frenzied pattern, its once steady rhythm dissolving into erratic spikes and valleys. Sarah's eyes flew wide with terror, her mouth opening in a silent scream as pain visibly tore through her ravaged body. "Mom?" Emily's scream ripped from her throat, primal and raw. "Mom, help! Somebody help us!" Sarah's skeletal fingers clawed at Emily's arm, her yellowed nails drawing blood as she fought to speak. Her cracked lips moved with desperate purpose, eyes locked on Emily's face with fierce maternal determination. "Don't ever forget." Each word was a battle against the void pulling her away. "Your sacred promise." Her body convulsed once, violently, before going terrifyingly still. The monitor beside her bed erupted into a high-pitched, unending wail that seemed to echo the screams inside Emily's head. "No, God, no!" Emily collapsed across her mother's body, still warm but unmistakably empty. "Mom, can you hear me? I promise. I swear on my life. Please don't leave me." The room filled with medical staff moving with urgent purpose, strong hands, pulling Emily away despite her animal-like howls of protest. Through a veil of tears and tangled hair, she watched them working on her mother's lifeless form, the violent compressions on Sarah's chest, the mask forcing air into lungs that no longer sought it. "Please," she begged, clutching the Bible so tightly the corners cut into her palms, drawing blood that mingled with her tears. "Please hear me, Mum. I'll keep my promise if it kills me. I swear on everything I am." The lead doctor stepped back, his gloved hands falling to his sides in defeat. He turned to Emily, his face a mask of professionally contained grief. "Ms. Bennett, I'm so sorry. We did everything possible, but your mother is..." Emily's knees buckled. She slid down the wall in slow motion, her body suddenly foreign and unresponsive. The Bible clutched to her chest like a shield against unbearable reality. In that moment of absolute desolation, she didn't know if her mother had heard her final pledge, if the promise that would dictate every choice in her future had reached Sarah before she crossed beyond human hearing. The only certainty was that she now stood completely alone in the universe, orphaned and adrift, clinging to a weathered Bible and a vow that felt carved into her very soul. The monitor's relentless, flat-lined shriek continued, a sound that would haunt Emily's nightmares for years to come. 3 years after Sarah's death, Boston's financial district buzzed with activity, oblivious to Emily Bennett's private hell. The glossy marble floors of Thornton & Pierce Financial reflected her gaunt face as she strode through the lobby, clutching her portfolio like armor. 3 years, and the grief still felt like a freshly opened wound. The anniversary of her mother's death loomed tomorrow, May 10th, Mother's Day, a cosmic cruelty. Her reflection in the elevator doors showed a stranger, hollow-cheeked, dark circles beneath once bright eyes, hair pulled back so severely it seemed to stretch her skin. At 32, she looked a decade older. Grief had aged her like prolonged illness. "Emily, wait up!" Megan, her supposed best friend, hurried over in designer heels that cost more than Emily's monthly rent. "Did you finish the Westridge presentation?" "Richardson's on the warpath." Emily nodded mechanically. Sleep had been impossible, so she'd worked until dawn, perfecting the pitch that might finally earn her the promotion she desperately needed. Her modest apartment in Somerville drained her, savings each month. Yet moving would mean surrendering the last place her mother had visited before hospitalization. "You look terrible," Megan whispered, maintaining her plastic smile for passing colleagues. "Maybe try concealer. The board doesn't respect weakness." The elevator ascended to the 38th floor, each floor marking time since she'd had an actual conversation beyond work pleasantries. Self-imposed isolation had become her religion. No dating, no friends, no life outside grinding hours that numbed her thoughts. The conference room windows offered panoramic views of the harbor, but Emily saw only her reflection, a ghost against Boston's skyline. Board members filtered in, expensive suits and predatory. Smiles, Chad Richardson, departmental head and notorious office predator, smirked when she attempted to speak. "Bennett, we'll take it from here. Be a dear and fetch coffee for everyone. But sir, I prepared the presentation, and..." "Did I stutter?" His eyes traveled down her body dismissively. "Unless you'd prefer discussing your performance review now." Megan avoided eye contact as Emily surrendered her portfolio to Chad, who immediately presented her work as his own. The humiliation burned. As she stumbled to the break room, hands shaking so violently she spilled coffee grounds across the counter. The board's laughter echoed down the hallway. She caught fragments. Bennett's mother, mental break, charity case, dead weight. Something shattered inside her. The company bathroom offered temporary sanctuary as she collapsed into a stall, violent sobs tearing from her throat. Her mother had died for nothing. Emily had broken her promise, allowing herself to be diminished. daily by people who saw kindness as weakness. Her chest constricted. Breaths came in shallow gasps. The stall walls seemed to close in as black spots danced across her vision. A full-blown panic attack seized her body, her heartbeat thundering in her ears. "Help," she whispered to empty air. "Mom, please." Consciousness slipped away as she slumped against the bathroom wall, her body sliding to the cold tile floor. "Miss, can you hear me?" A deep voice penetrated the darkness. Rough, warm hands supported her head, the touch gentle despite their calloused texture. Emily's eyelids fluttered. A man knelt beside her, mid-30s, broad-shouldered, wearing a grey maintenance uniform. His concerned eyes met hers, deep brown with flecks of amber, framed by dark lashes. A jagged scar ran from his temple to jaw, partially hidden by stubble. "Don't try to move yet," he said, voice low and steady. "You had a panic attack. Focus on breathing with me. In through your nose, 4 counts." Emily found herself obeying, matching his exaggerated breaths. "Hold for 7, he continued, his eyes never leaving hers. "Now out through your mouth, 8 counts. His hand remained on her wrist, monitoring her pulse. The respectful distance he maintained despite their proximity spoke of unusual understanding. "I'm Jake," he said simply. "The janitor. Found you when I came to fix the sink." "Emily," she whispered, mortification flooding back. "God, I'm sorry." "Don't apologize for being human," Jake interrupted, his voice carrying unexpected authority. "Everybody breaks sometimes." Something in his words penetrated years of carefully constructed walls. Tears spilled down her cheeks, unchecked. "My mother used to say," Jake continued softly, "that the strongest people aren't those who never fall apart, but those who gather their pieces and rebuild, as many times as necessary." Emily froze. Her mother's exact words, the same phrase Sarah had repeated through chemo treatments. "How did you—" The bathroom door swung open. Megan stood framed in the doorway, horror etched across her perfectly. Made-up face. "Emily, what are you doing?" Her gaze swept dismissively over Jake. "The board is asking for you. Richardson is furious." Jake stood, his height suddenly apparent. She fainted. "Needs medical attention, not workplace harassment." Megan's expression hardened. "Excuse me, maintenance staff don't address management directly. I'll call security." "Don't," Emily interjected, finding her voice. "Please, Megan." Jake helped Emily stand, his steadying hand between her shoulder blades impossibly gentle for its size. "You deserve better than this place," he murmured, audible only to her. "Than these people." For one heartbeat, Emily felt something crack in her carefully constructed emotional fortress. This stranger's kindness after years of calculated cruelty felt like water after drought. "Thank you," she whispered, meaning it completely for the first time in 3 years. As she followed Megan out, Emily glanced back. Jake watched her go, something unreadable in his expression. For the briefest moment, she could have sworn she glimpsed something familiar in those eyes, something that reminded her of home. She couldn't know then that this moment of absolute vulnerability would completely transform both their wounded lives. Night fell over Manhattan as Jake Miller entered, his penthouse, 60 floors above the glittering city. He shed his janitor's uniform like a snake shedding skin, revealing the truth beneath the disguise. Jacob Alexander Blackwood III, sole heir to the Blackwood fortune, one of the wealthiest men in America. The transformation was jarring. From humble maintenance worker to billionaire in the elevator ride up, Jake moved to the wall-to-wall windows overlooking Central Park. The city spread below him like a carpet of stars. He pressed his forehead against the cool glass, breath fogging the immaculate surface. "Happy birthday," he whispered to his reflection, raising a crystal tumbler of scotch older than he was. 35 years old today. 7 years since the crash. The memories came unbidden, his family's private jet breaking apart over the Rockies, the deafening chaos, his mother's scream cut short, his father's body shielding him as the aircraft disintegrated. Jake alone had survived, pulled from the wreckage with injuries that had taken years to heal externally. Inside, he remained shattered. He unbuttoned his shirt, revealing the network of scars across his torso, permanent reminders etched in raised flesh. The physical pain had been nothing compared to the isolation of being the last Blackwood. The penthouse, despite its opulence, echoed with emptiness. No birthday dinner, no family, just silence and memories. Jake moved to his desk, unlocking a drawer to extract a velvet box. Inside, lay the engagement ring Vanessa had thrown back at him 4 years ago at St. Patrick's Cathedral. 200 guests had witnessed his humiliation as she'd called off the wedding at the altar. "I can't marry damaged goods," she'd hissed privately, before announcing publicly that she couldn't go through with it. Later, he'd discovered the truth. Rumors of his financial ruin after a temporary stock plunge had sent her fleeing. The fortune she'd coveted had recovered within weeks, but by then Jake's trust in humanity had flatlined. He snapped the box shut, the sound sharp in the silent apartment. The nightmares had started immediately after. Panic attacks so severe he couldn't leave his home. One particularly bad night he'd stood on this very balcony, 60 stories up, 1 foot over the edge. His old butler Thomas had pulled him back, held him as he sobbed like a child. "What's the point of surviving when everyone you love is gone?" he'd asked the old man. Thomas had no answer, but he'd arranged the best psychiatric care money could. By 3 months at an exclusive Connecticut rehabilitation center, specializing in trauma. There, Jake had made his decision. The Blackwood name, the fortune, the expectations, they'd brought nothing but pain and vultures circling what remained of his life. He'd created Jake Miller, maintenance worker. A simple life where connections were genuine, where no one wanted anything from him but an honest day's work. For 2 years he'd lived this double life, maintaining minimal engagement with his corporate empire through trusted advisors while spending days working with his hands, fixing, cleaning, building. The physical labor helped quiet his mind. People treated Jake Miller normally, not as a tragic figure or a walking bank account, until today. Until her Emily Bennett. Jake poured another drink, trying to erase the image of those haunted green eyes. He recognized that look, the 1,000-yard stare of someone intimately acquainted with loss. Her breakdown in the bathroom had triggered his own painful memories, and when he'd recited his mother's favorite saying about broken people rebuilding themselves, Emily had reacted as though struck. The connection had been electric, unsettling. "You can't get involved," he told his reflection sternly. "You know what happens when people discover who you really are." But he couldn't forget how small she'd felt when he'd helped her up. The whispered, "Thank you," that had sounded like it cost her everything. The panic attack seized him without warning. His heart raced, sweat beading on his forehead as the room started spinning. He stumbled to the bathroom, barely making it before vomiting violently into the marble sink. These episodes had become more frequent lately. The doctors called it PTSD. The survivor's guilt, compounded by Vanessa's betrayal, had left psychological wounds deeper than the physical ones. Jake slid to the bathroom floor, back against the cold tile, forcing himself through the breathing exercises his therapist had taught him. In through the nose, hold, out through the mouth. The same pattern he'd guided Emily through hours earlier. When the attack finally subsided, he dragged himself to bed, not bothering to remove his clothes. The king-sized mattress felt like an ocean, the silk sheets cool against his feverish skin. Sleep came eventually, but so did the nightmare, the same one that had plagued him for years. The plane breaking apart, his parents' bodies, Vanessa at the altar, her beautiful face twisted with contempt. But tonight, something new appeared. Emily Bennett collapsing, reaching out for help that never came. Jake jolted awake at 3 a.m., sheets soaked with sweat. He stumbled to the window, staring at the sleeping city below. "You're the last," he whispered to himself, a mantra repeated countless times since the crash. The last Blackwood. The words that had once filled him with purpose now felt hollow. What was the point of preserving a legacy with no one to share it? No one who saw the man beneath the name, the scars beneath the suits. Dawn found him still, at the window, watching the city wake. In a few hours, Jake Miller, the janitor, would return to Thornton and Pierce Financial. He would fix broken things, clean messes, fade into the background, and perhaps, if he was both lucky and cursed, he would see Emily Bennett again, a woman whose eyes reflected his own pain so perfectly it terrified him. What he couldn't know was that this encounter had already set in motion events that would force both their carefully constructed worlds to collapse, revealing the truths they'd worked so hard to hide. 2 months after their bathroom encounter, Emily found herself smiling for the first time in years. Jake waited by the service entrance of Thornton and Pierce Financial each evening, walking her to the tea station through Boston's fickle spring weather. Today, he'd brought her coffee, remembering exactly how she took it. "You look better," he said, his deep voice gentle. Less haunted, Emily studied him, this janitor who quoted philosophy and noticed details others missed. His uniform was always impeccably clean, his scarred hands strong yet careful. Sometimes she caught flashes of something in his manner, an unexpected sophistication at odds with his position. "I feel better," she admitted. "The panic attacks are less frequent." What she didn't say that his friendship had become her lifeline. Their conversations, tentative at first, then flowing freely, had awakened something she thought died with her mother. Tonight, Jake had suggested dinner at a small Italian restaurant in North End. Nothing fancy, just two friends sharing pasta and conversation. Emily had agreed before anxiety could intervene. "There you are," a cold voice interrupted. Chad Richardson approached, designer suit impeccable. "Working late again, Bennett, or just fraternizing with the help?" Jake stiffened beside her. Emily felt heat rush to her face. "We were just leaving, Mr. Richardson," she said, forcing professionalism into her voice. Chad's eyes flicked dismissively over Jake. "Didn't realize janitorial staff had clearance to socialize with financial analysts." His smile turned predatory. "Unless there's another arrangement I'm unaware of?" The implication hung in the air, ugly and deliberate. "You're out of line." Jake's voice had changed, an authority emerging that made Chad blink in surprise. "Excuse me? Do you know who I am?" "Someone who should apologize to Ms. Bennett immediately." Emily touched Jake's arm, feeling the tension in his muscles. "Jake, it's fine, let's just go." Chad's face darkened. "First name basis with the trash collector, Emily? How the mighty Bennetts have fallen." Jake stepped forward, but Emily pulled him back. "He's not worth it." "Listen to her, janitor." Chad sneered. "Keep to your mops and leave the ladies to men of their own class." They left, Emily pulling Jake away before the situation escalated. Outside, rain had started falling, matching her mood. "I'm sorry," she whispered. "He's always been awful." Jake's expression was unreadable. "Does everyone at that firm treat you this way?" Emily looked away. "Not everyone, just the ones with power." The dinner that followed was subdued, shadows from their encounter lingering. Yet by dessert, Jake had coaxed a genuine laugh from her with stories from his previous life, as he called it, never quite explaining what that meant. Walking her home to her Somerville apartment, Jake finally asked, "Why do you stay there?" "At Thornton and Pierce." Emily stared at the cracked sidewalk. "My mother's medical bills, the debt, and it's crushing. I need the salary. Even at the cost of your dignity." The question hung between them, unanswered. At her door, Jake hesitated. "Emily, I need to tell you something." Her phone rang, her father. Emily hadn't spoken to him since Sarah's funeral. "I should take this," she said apologetically. Jake nodded, squeezing her hand before disappearing into the night. "Hello," Emily answered cautiously. "What the hell do you think you're doing?" Her father's voice, slurred with alcohol, assaulted. "Her," Richardson called. "Says you're sleeping with the janitor." "What? That's not—" "I'm in town. Meet me at Marceau's in Beacon Hill. 1 hour." The line went dead. Emily hadn't seen Richard Bennett in 3 years. Yet an hour later, she sat across from him in an upscale restaurant, acutely aware of her department store clothes amid Boston's elite. Her father had aged poorly, bloated from drinking, designer suit hiding an expanding waistline. Beside him sat his new wife, Catherine, barely older than Emily herself. "You look terrible," was his greeting. "No wonder you're reduced to dating maintenance staff." "Jake is my friend," Emily said firmly, "and it's none of your business who I spend time with." Richard's face purpled. "It becomes my business when my colleagues call about my daughter debasing herself with the help." Nearby diners turned to stare. Catherine examined her manicure, bored. "Lower your voice," Emily hissed. "You abandoned Mom when she needed you most. You don't get to judge my choices." "Your mother was weak," Richard snapped. "Just like you're being weak. The Bennetts have standards." "Standards?" Emily laughed, bitterly. "You left your dying wife penniless." "I left a sinking ship," he countered coldly. "Now you're climbing aboard another one. Some janitor. Have you no pride?" "Jake is twice the man you are." Richard slammed his fist down. "I won't have it. Either end this inappropriate relationship, or I'll disown you completely." "You can't disown someone you've already abandoned," Emily whispered. Richard stood abruptly. "Get out. You're no daughter of mine. You're just like your pathetic mother." Something snapped inside Emily. "Don't you dare speak about her." "I'll speak however I want about that burden I carried for 15 years. Tears blinded Emily as she stumbled from the table. Outside, rain poured in sheets. Without an umbrella or coat, she was instantly soaked. "Emily." Richard had followed her. "You walk away now, you're dead to me." I'll make sure everyone in Boston finance knows what you are." She kept walking, rain mixing with tears. Unknown to either of them, Jake stood across the street, having followed out of concern. He watched Emily's father shouting after her retreating figure, saw her shoulders shaking with sobs as she walked alone through the downpour. Back in his penthouse, Jake vomited from anxiety, his body reacting to the helpless rage he felt watching. Emily suffer. Scenes from the night replayed in his mind, her humiliation, her pain. He could end this. One phone call revealing his true identity would silence Richardson and Emily's father instantly. The Blackwood name carried enough weight to crush them both, but revealing himself meant losing the one genuine connection he'd found. The moment Emily learned who he really was, everything would change. Jake stared at his reflection, at the scars visible beneath his unbuttoned shirt, physical reminders of survival. Emily's scars were invisible, but no less real. "What would you do?" he asked his parents' photograph. "If you loved someone who didn't even know who you really are?" The question hung unanswered in the empty penthouse, as Jake struggled with a truth becoming impossible to deny. He was falling in love with Emily Bennett, even as his deception grew with each passing day. The termination notice arrived 3 weeks after the scene with her father. Emily stared at the paper with Richard Bennett's signature, authorizing her dismissal for inappropriate workplace relationships and failure to maintain professional standards. Her father had made good on his threat. As a major client of Thornton and Pierce, one phone call had been enough. Emily cleared her desk under watchful eyes, former colleagues suddenly strangers. Megan approached as she reached the elevator. "I tried to warn you," she whispered. "Sleeping with the help, what did you expect? We never—" Emily began, but stopped. The truth didn't matter here. Outside, June's sunshine mocked her despair. She'd lost her income, her professional reputation, and her last family connection in one brutal sweep. Only Jake remained, his steady presence the single light in growing darkness. But today, even that comfort was unavailable. Jake had called apologetically that morning, explaining a family emergency required his immediate attention. Emily hadn't pressed for details, respecting the privacy he maintained about his personal life. Alone in her apartment, Emily calculated her remaining resources. 3 months' rent in savings, no health insurance after the end of the month, medical bills still arriving regularly from her mother's extended treatment. Tears blurred the numbers as she realized how quickly destitution approached. Her phone rang, an unfamiliar Maryland number. "Ms. Bennett," a formal voice asked. "This is Dr. Patel from Veterans Affairs Medical Center in Baltimore. Are you sitting down?" Emily's knees buckled. "What is this about?" "It concerns your mother, Sarah Bennett." The world tilted sideways. "My mother died 3 years ago." Silence, then, "Ms. Bennett, I'm afraid there's been a catastrophic administrative error. The patient in our long-term care facility, previously Jane Doe number 7, has been identified through DNA database matching as Sarah Bennett. She's been in a persistent vegetative state since an ambulance transfer went wrong 3 years ago." Emily couldn't breathe. "That's impossible. I identified her body. I buried her." "The records indicate another patient was mistakenly identified as your mother. Mrs. Bennett suffered cardiac arrest during transport between facilities, but was resuscitated. Due to identification errors, she remained unidentified until recent database upgrades triggered automated matching." The room spun as Emily processed the unthinkable. "My mother is alive." "Yes, but I must prepare you, her condition is grave. She shows minimal brain activity and requires constant life support." Emily booked the first flight to Baltimore, emptying her meager savings. The VA hospital corridors stretched endlessly, each step bringing her closer to a miracle twisted into nightmare. Dr. Patel's eyes were kind but grave. "She's been transferred from state to Medicare coverage, but their policy only supports 30 days of life-sustaining care without improvement. After that," the unspoken hung in the air, "her mother would be disconnected. There must be options," Emily whispered. "Experimental treatments? Private care?" Dr. Patel hesitated. "There's a neurological intervention showing promise in similar cases, but it's experimental, not covered by any insurance. The cost would be—" He named a figure that made Emily's breath catch. More money than she'd ever see in a lifetime. "May. I see her now." The room was sterile, machines maintaining the illusion of life. Emily approached the bed slowly, heart hammering against her ribs. Sarah Bennett's face was gaunt, skin pulled taut over prominent bones. Her once vibrant red hair had faded to steel gray, but it was unmistakably her mother. The same delicate nose, the same arch of eyebrows. "Mum?" Emily whispered, taking her limp hand. No response came, not even a flicker of eyelids. The steady beep of monitors provided cruel counterpoint to the silence. Emily collapsed into the bedside chair, mind racing. Her mother hadn't died hearing her promise after all. She'd been here, trapped between life and death, while Emily grieved an empty casket. "I'll find a way," she vowed, pressing her mother's cold hand to her cheek. "I won't lose you twice." Back at her apartment 2 days later, Emily faced twin catastrophes. Her mother alive but fading, with only 28 days before life support would be terminated, and herself unemployed, blacklisted in Boston's financial sector, with bills mounting daily. Morning sickness caught her by surprise, denial crumbling, as she counted back the weeks since her last night with Jake, their relationship consummated in tender desperation after her firing. A drugstore test confirmed what her body already knew: pregnant, jobless, with a mother who needed impossible money to survive. Emily applied for every position she could find, from retail to food service, her finance degree suddenly worthless. Against her father's industry-wide smear campaign, each rejection drove her deeper into despair. At a job fair in Copley Square, she waited hours for brief interviews that went nowhere. Disheveled and exhausted, she caught her reflection in a shop window, hollow-eyed, gaunt, hair unwashed. Unrecognizable. "Are you selling?" A woman beside her nodded at Emily's long hair. "Excuse me? Your hair. Red hair fetches good prices, 10 inches minimum." She pressed a business card into Emily's hand. "They pay up front." That afternoon, Emily sat in a chair as scissors sheared away her hair. Her mother's hair, the same shade Sarah had once been so proud of. $200 in her pocket. Dignity trimmed away with each snip. The blood bank came next, twice in 1 week, until dizziness forced her to stop. Plasma donation followed, leaving her arm bruised and her body weakened. Still, the money gathered was laughable against her mother's treatment costs. In her apartment bathroom, Emily stared at her reflection. Cropped hair, skin pale from blood, lost body just beginning to show changes from the life growing inside. Desperate calculations ran through her mind. 23 days until they disconnected her mother. The child inside her would never know its grandmother. A sob tore from her, throat primal and raw. She collapsed to the tile floor, fingers pulling at her shorn hair in mindless anguish. No one came at the sound. No neighbors checked the keening that echoed through thin walls. In a city of millions, Emily Bennett was utterly, catastrophically alone. Outside her bathroom window, unnoticed, Jake Miller stood in the rain, watching her shadows move behind frosted glass. The sound of her breakdown carried faintly through closed windows, each sob a knife to his chest. His hand clutched a phone, one call to reveal himself, to deploy the Blackwood fortune to save this woman he'd grown to love. But fear held him, paralyzed, not of poverty or exposure, but of losing the only person who'd seen him as simply human in 7 years. What neither knew, in their parallel suffering, they were both running out of time to save what mattered most. Emily's phone vibrated on the bathroom floor where she'd spent the night, too weak from blood donation and morning sickness to make it to bed. 18 days remained before her mother's life support would be terminated. The caller ID made her stomach lurch. Chad Richardson. "Bennett," his voice oozed false concern. "How the mighty have fallen. Word is you're desperate for work." Emily said nothing, hand instinctively moving to her still flat abdomen. "Silent treatment? Fine. I'm at the Capitol Grill on Boylston, noon. I have a proposition that might interest someone in your delicate situation." The line went dead before she could respond. Emily hadn't spoken to Jake in days, avoiding his calls while hiding her pregnancy and her mother's situation. The shame of her rapid descent into poverty paralyzed her. How could she tell the man she was falling in love with that she couldn't even feed herself, let alone a child? The upscale restaurant's hostess eyed Emily's second-hand clothes skeptically, but led her to Chad's corner table. He looked immaculate as always, Rolex glinting as he sipped an expensive bourbon. "You look terrible," he observed coolly. "Hungry?" Emily's stomach growled audibly. She hadn't eaten properly in days. "Why am I here, Chad?" He signaled a waiter. "Filet mignon for the lady, rare." Then to Emily, "You need iron. You're too pale." Cut the act. "What do you want?" Chad leaned back, studying her with predatory eyes. "I know everything, Emily. Your mother's miraculous resurrection, the deadline for her care, your condition." His gaze flicked to her stomach. Cold fear washed through her. "How could you possibly—" "Your father may be a bastard, but he's a well-connected one. Hospital boards, insurance companies. Richard Bennett has friends everywhere." Chad's smile never reached his eyes. "Including your obstetrician's office." Emily's hands trembled. "That's a HIPAA violation." "Sue me," Chad shrugged. "With what money?" The waiter delivered her steak. The smell made her simultaneously ravenous and nauseated. "Here's my offer," Chad continued, sliding an envelope across the table. "Inside is a cashier's check that covers your mother's experimental treatment and 1 year of private care afterward." Emily stared at the envelope, heart hammering. "Why would you do this?" "Because I want you, Emily, I always have." His voice hardened. "But not as the janitor's leftovers. Not pregnant with his bastard." She flinched at his cruelty. "So here are my terms." Chad produced a thick document. "A prenuptial agreement and immediate marriage license application. Sign both today." Emily's fingers hovered over the envelope containing the miracle her mother needed. "What does the prenup say?" "Standard provisions. You get nothing if you leave me. Ever. You terminate all contact with the janitor immediately. The child, if you insist on keeping it, will legally be mine with no acknowledgement of its biological father." The restaurant spun around her. "You want me to cut Jake out of his child's life? Permanently? I want you to make a choice, your mother or your janitor boyfriend." Chad's voice was ice. "One dies in 18 days without this money. The other will survive just fine without you. You're a monster. I'm practical. You need a miracle. I can provide it." He gestured to the envelope. "But my generosity has limits and conditions. What guarantee do I have that you'll fulfill your promises after I sign?" Chad produced another document. "Joint account documentation. The money transfers to your mother's medical providers upon our marriage. 1 week from today." Emily felt something crack inside her. "Why me? You could have anyone." "Because you're the only woman who ever chose someone beneath her over me." His eyes flashed with malice. "I collect things others value, Emily. It's what I do. And the photos on your phone from that night we dated, the ones you threatened to release if I didn't sleep with you." Chad's smile turned predatory. "Insurance that you'll be an obedient wife. Cross me and those images go public. Your reputation is already in tatters. Imagine what would remain then." Emily excused herself to the bathroom, locking the door behind her. Violent sobs racked her body as she pressed her forehead against the cool marble wall. Eventually, she began rhythmically banging her head against the surface, welcoming the physical pain as distraction from her impossible choice. Her mother or Jake, her mother or her dignity, her mother or her child's right to know its father. In her purse, prescription pills from her last doctor's visit seemed to offer another solution. She could end it all, the pregnancy, the choice, the pain. But her mother's face swam before her eyes. Sarah Bennett had never given up, not through cancer, not through abandonment. She had fought for Emily until her last conscious moment. How could Emily do any less? With trembling hands, she returned to the table. The steak had grown cold. "I'll need to read the documents carefully," she said, voice hollow. Chad's smile was triumphant. "Of course. My lawyer is waiting in the hotel across the street. You can review everything with him before signing." 3 hours later, Emily Bennett had signed away her future. The cashier's check was already being processed for wire transfer to the Maryland medical facility. Her mother would receive the experimental treatment. She would live, and Emily would die inside every day as Chad Richardson's trophy wife. Outside the hotel, rain fell in sheets. Emily stood unmoving, letting it soak her completely. Her phone buzzed with Jake's 15th call of the day. For the first time since they'd met, she answered. "Emily, thank God. I've been worried sick. Where are you?" The sound of his voice, warm, genuine concern, nearly broke her resolve. "We need to talk," she said flatly. "Tomorrow, the public garden, 10 a.m. What's wrong?" "Are you sound?" "Tomorrow," she repeated, ending the call before emotion betrayed her. In her purse, the bottle of pills seemed to grow heavier. One last escape route if her courage failed tomorrow, when she'd have to look Jake in the eyes and destroy everything beautiful between them with cruel, necessary lies. What she couldn't know was that Jake had already set his own desperate plan in motion, one that would reveal his true identity to save her mother, regardless of what it cost him personally. Their collision course would bring revelations. Neither was prepared to face, and choices more impossible than either had imagined possible. Emily arrived at Maryland Veterans Hospital a day earlier than planned, desperate for one last visit with her mother before meeting Jake to end things. The treatment funds from Chad would be transferred tomorrow after she signed the final marriage paperwork. Her engagement ring, ostentatious and cold, weighed her finger down like a shackle. The hospital corridors seemed different today, busier, with administrative staff hurrying about. As Emily approached her mother's room, she noticed an unusual number of doctors gathered outside. "Excuse me," she said to a nurse. "Is something wrong with Sarah Bennett?" The young nurse smiled. "Wrong? No, quite the opposite. There's been a development." Emily's heart raced as she pushed past into the room. Her mother lay as before, still and unresponsive, but the equipment around her had changed. Newer, more sophisticated machines hummed efficiently. "Ms. Bennett?" A distinguished doctor stepped forward, extending his hand. "I'm Dr. Grayson, head of neurology. You're earlier than expected. What's happening? Has the money already been transferred?" The doctor looked confused. "Money, no. Blackwood Biomedical has fully funded your mother's treatment and enrolled her in our advanced neural regeneration program. The paperwork was finalized yesterday." Emily's world tilted sideways. "Blackwood Biomedical? I don't understand. I never contacted them. The company's owner personally authorized everything. I assumed you knew. He's been quite involved, requested daily updates, brought in specialists from Switzerland. Frankly, it's unprecedented." The door opened behind them. "Doctor, the MRI results are..." Emily turned. Jake stood frozen in the doorway, dressed not in his janitor's uniform but an impeccably tailored suit. Their eyes locked in mutual shock. "Jake," she whispered, "what are you doing here?" Dr. Grayson looked between them, confusion evident. "You know each other? Mr. Blackwood, I thought you said..." "Blackwood?" Emily's voice rose sharply. "Jake Miller is a janitor at Thornton & Pierce Financial." Jake took a step forward, hand outstretched. "Emily, I can explain. Mr. Blackwood has been arranging your mother's care personally," Dr. Grayson continued, oblivious to the tension. "He's been quite adamant about using the most advanced treatments available." Monitors blared suddenly as Sarah's vitals spiked. A code team rushed in, pushing Emily aside as her mother's body convulsed on the bed. "She's in V-fib," a nurse shouted. "Code blue!" Emily pressed herself against the wall, mind reeling between the twin shocks, her mother's crisis and Jake's deception. "You lied to me," she whispered as Jake moved to her side. "Everything was a lie." "Not everything," he said desperately. "Not what matters. Clear." A doctor applied defibrillator paddles to Sarah's chest. Her body arched upward with the shock, then fell limply back. The monitor continued its frantic alarm. "Jake Miller doesn't exist," Emily continued, voice rising hysterically. "Who are you, really?" "Jacob Alexander Blackwood III, he admitted, eyes never leaving hers. "But the person you know, that's the real me, Emily. The first real me I've been in years." "Charging to 300, the doctor called. "Clear." Emily felt something crack inside her chest. "Why? Why pretend to be someone you're not? Was it amusing to watch me struggle, to see how the other half lives? No. After the crash, after everyone I loved died..." "Crash? What crash?" a nurse interrupted. "Ms. Bennett, you need to leave. We need space to work." But Emily stood rooted, caught between her mother's fight for life and the unraveling of everything she thought she knew. "My family's plane crashed in the Rockies 7 years ago," Jake said quickly. "I was the only survivor. Afterward, people only saw the money, the name, never me, until you." "Pushing epi," a doctor called. "Continue compressions." Emily's hand moved protectively to her stomach, a gesture Jake's eyes tracked with sudden comprehension. "You're pregnant," he whispered, face paling. "Is it? Are we?" The crushing weight of too many secrets, too many betrayals, pressed down on Emily. "Yes, but it doesn't matter now. Doesn't matter. Emily, how can you say..." "Because I'm marrying Chad Richardson tomorrow." The words fell between them like stones. "He's paying for my mother's treatment." Jake's face contorted. "What?" "No, I've already arranged everything. Your mother will receive the best care possible. You don't need Richardson." "I've already signed the papers," Emily said hollowly. "And the prenup. It's done. Unsign them." "Emily, whatever he's offering I can..." "What? Buy me instead." Fury erupted through her grief. "I'm not for sale, and I don't need another liar in my life." "We've got rhythm," a doctor shouted suddenly. The frantic beeping stabilized into regular peaks. "She's back." Relief washed through Emily, immediately followed by crushing guilt. She'd been arguing while her mother nearly died. "This conversation is over," she said, turning away from Jake. "Thank you for helping my mother. Now please leave." "Emily, please." But she had already pushed past him, moving to her mother's bedside as the medical team stepped back. Sarah remained unconscious, but alive, for now. "I should inform you," Dr. Grayson said gently. "Your mother experienced significant brain activity during the episode. It's too early for conclusions, but there are positive indicators." Emily nodded numbly, unable to process anything beyond the baseline fact that her mother still breathed. Behind her, Jake stood paralyzed between leaving as she asked and fighting for what they'd found together. The clock on the wall showed 2:37 p.m. In less than 24 hours, Emily would legally bind herself to a man who saw her as property to be acquired. "I have nowhere to stay tonight," Emily said to no one in particular, her voice small and lost. "There's a patient family suite on the 3rd floor," a nurse offered kindly. "I'll arrange it for you." Jake took a step toward her. "Emily, don't." She raised her hand without turning. "Just don't." Left alone with her unconscious mother, Emily finally allowed the tears to come. The enormity of the day's revelations crashed over her. Jake's true identity, her mother's fragile improvement, the Faustian bargain with Chad that now seemed unnecessary, yet inescapable. In the hallway, Jake stood watching through the window, his own world collapsing as he realized he might have saved her mother, but lost Emily forever. And with her, the child he'd just discovered existed. What neither could see in that moment of absolute desolation was that their parallel heartbreaks were creating ripples that would soon converge into the most devastating storm either had yet faced. Thunder rumbled across Maryland's night sky as Emily sat beside her sleeping mother, the hospital room lit only by monitoring equipment's ghostly glow. A nurse had brought Sarah's personal effects earlier, a small box containing the few possessions that had survived 3 years of administrative errors and transfers between facilities. "These were with her when she arrived," the nurse had explained gently. "We keep patients' personal items, even unidentified ones, hoping family eventually comes." Emily had thanked her mechanically, too emotionally exhausted to process another exchange. Now unable to sleep, she sifted through the meager contents. Her mother's wedding ring, a tarnished locket, and a small leather journal Emily had never seen before. The journal's spine cracked as she opened it. Pages yellowed with age. Her mother's familiar handwriting filled each page, dates going back 30 years. Emily hesitated, feeling like an intruder, then began to read. These words were all she had left of the mother who lay breathing but unreachable beside her. Early entries detailed Sarah's nursing career, her dreams, her unhappy marriage to Richard. Then a name caught Emily's eye. Alexander Blackwood. Her blood ran cold. "August 17th, 1989, she read silently. "Martha's Vineyard. Alex says we must end things before Richard suspects. His wife is pregnant with their son. I'm devastated, but understand. We both made vows to others. These stolen weeks have been the only honest love I've known. His family's summer home will forever hold my heart." Emily's hands trembled violently. Alexander Blackwood, Jake's father. Her mother and Jake's father had been lovers. She read frantically through subsequent entries, finding fragmented references to the affair, apparently rekindled briefly years later, after both had children. May 2nd, 1995. Saw Alex in Boston with his boy. The child has his eyes exactly. My heart aches knowing Emily might have been his daughter in another life. Richard suspects nothing, thankfully. Some secrets must remain buried forever. Emily gasped, nearly dropping the journal. The implications hammered through her mind with sickening clarity. If her mother and Jake's father had been involved when she was conceived. "No," she whispered, hand pressed to her mouth. "It can't be." She flipped frantically through pages, searching for clarity, finding only more questions. The last entry mentioning Alexander was dated shortly before his death in the plane crash. September 10th, 2017. News of the crash is everywhere. Alex, his wife, their daughter all gone. Only the son survived. I light a candle each night, praying for the boy who might have been my child's brother in another life. Brother. The word echoed in Emily's mind with horrifying implications. Dawn found her still reading, piecing together a story of forbidden love that stretched across decades. No definitive answer emerged about her paternity, only possibility. Terrible, nauseating possibility. Outside, rain pounded against windows, as a full-blown storm engulfed the hospital. Emily paced, mind racing through memories of passionate nights with Jake, the child growing inside her. If Jake was her half-brother, her phone rang, startling her. Chad Richardson's name flashed on the screen. "Where are you?" he demanded, without preamble. "We have appointments with the Justice of Peace in 3 hours." Emily barely registered his words. "I can't today, Chad. My mother had a crisis." "Don't play games, Emily. We had a deal. I need more time." His voice hardened. "1 day. That's all you get. I'll rebook everything for tomorrow. Don't test me." She ended the call feeling nothing but numb horror. The storm had intensified by afternoon, turning day to premature dusk when Emily heard footsteps approaching the room. Jake appeared in the doorway, soaked from rain, eyes haunted from obvious sleeplessness. "Emily, please, 5 minutes." "Leave," she whispered, clutching the journal like a shield. "You shouldn't be here." He stepped forward anyway. "I've been up all night trying to understand whatever Richardson is holding over you. I can help. Please let me." Emily backed away until the window stopped her retreat. Lightning flashed, illuminating both their tortured faces. "Did you know?" she demanded suddenly. "About our parents?" Jake's brow furrowed. "What about them?" With trembling hands, Emily thrust the journal toward him. "Your father and my mother were lovers for years, including when I was conceived." The blood drained from Jake's face as understanding dawned. "That's not possible." "Read it yourself," she choked out. "Your father, Alexander Blackwood, and my mother, Sarah Bennett. Martha's Vineyard. The affair, all of it." Jake stood frozen, the journal untouched between them. "You think we might be half-siblings?" The word hung in the sterile air between them, toxic and devastating. Without warning, Emily bolted past him, through the hospital corridors out into the raging storm. Jake followed, calling her name as rain instantly soaked them both. Emily ran blindly until she found herself at the nearby cemetery, where she'd once believed her mother was buried. The empty grave stood as monument to compounded grief and deception. "Emily?" "Stop!" Jake caught up, grasping her arm. "Listen to me!" She wrenched away, rain plastering her hair to her skull, clothes clinging to her shivering body. "What if it's true? What if we're related by blood?" Lightning cracked overhead, thunder following instantly. Jake stood before her, equally drenched, his expensive suit ruined. "We need DNA tests," he said, voice raised against the storm. "Immediately, before we jump to conclusions." "Conclusions?" Emily's laugh verged on hysteria. "I'm pregnant with what might be my brother's child. What conclusions should I draw?" Jake flinched as if struck. "This can't be happening." Emily sank to her knees in the mud, rain mingling with her tears. "I promised my mother I'd only marry someone who truly loved me. Instead, I've committed incest and agreed to marry a monster to save her life." "You haven't committed incest," Jake insisted, kneeling before her despite the mud. "We don't know anything for certain. I know I'm carrying a child conceived with a man who lied about his identity from the moment we met." She pounded her fists against his chest. "Who played at being poor while watching me sell my hair and blood for money?" Each accusation landed like physical blows. Jake made no move to defend himself. "I'll arrange the DNA test tonight," he said finally. "The fastest, most accurate analysis money can buy, then we'll know. And if we're related..." Emily's voice broke completely. "What?" Then Jake had no answer. They remained kneeling in the mud, rain washing over them like some biblical cleansing, while lightning crashed around the cemetery, nature itself seemingly recoiling from their potential sin. "I swear to you," Jake finally said, "I'll find the complete truth, whatever it takes." Emily looked up at him, this stranger she'd given her heart and body to, possibly her own blood, and felt something vital break inside her. "Some truths destroy everything they touch," she whispered. "Some promises were never meant to be kept." Above them, lightning struck a nearby tree, splitting it with explosive force, a violent punctuation to words that might prove prophetic for them both. The DNA results arrived with clinical precision 3 days later. Jake received them in his Manhattan penthouse, hands trembling as he opened the sealed envelope. "Not related," the report confirmed in stark medical terminology. "Different genetic markers, no shared parentage." The affair between his father and Sarah Bennett had not resulted in Emily's conception. That small mercy felt hollow amid the wreckage of what remained. Jake tried calling Emily immediately, but her phone went straight to voicemail. His texts remained unread. The hospital confirmed she hadn't returned since checking herself out against medical advice shortly after their confrontation in the cemetery. The concierge at Emily's apartment building reluctantly revealed she'd moved out 2 days ago. No forwarding address. As if she'd deliberately vanished from the face of the earth. What the concierge couldn't tell him, Emily had suffered a complete nervous breakdown after their cemetery encounter. The strain of her mother's situation, the pregnancy, the DNA uncertainty, and Chad's ultimatum had finally shattered her completely. After collapsing in the hospital parking lot, she'd been admitted to McLean Psychiatric Hospital outside Boston. The attending physician had found her clutching her mother's journal, repeating, "I broke my promise," like a mantra, her eyes vacant and unresponsive. Dr. Levine studied her chart with concern. "Ms. Bennett hasn't spoken coherently since admission. She's experiencing severe dissociative symptoms consistent with acute stress disorder." What caught his attention, however, was the mention of explicit photos being circulated online, apparently released the morning after her admission. Anonymous, but clearly targeting her specifically. The timing wasn't coincidental. Her obstetrician confirms she's in her first trimester, the nurse reported. Physically stable, but the psychological trauma presents significant risks. Meanwhile, Jake had deployed every resource at his disposal to find Emily. Private investigators tracked her to McLean through hospital transfer records, but administration refused him access. "Family only," they insisted despite his pleas. Desperate and running out of options, Jake made the decision that would forever alter his life's trajectory. In his penthouse office, he summoned his board of directors and legal team. "I want all assets liquidated," he announced without preamble. "Everything, immediately." His CFO nearly choked. "Mr. Blackwood, we're talking about $67 billion. You can't just—" "I can and I will." Jake's voice left no room for debate. "Convert everything to cash and set up the following distributions." By midnight, Jacob Alexander Blackwood III had divested himself of his entire fortune, allocating funds to 3 specific purposes: a trust for Sarah Bennett's lifetime care, a separate trust for Emily's unborn child, and a massive campaign to purchase and permanently erase all digital copies of the compromising photos Chad Richardson had released. The financial world reeled at the news. Headlines screamed about the Blackwood fortune disappearing overnight. Speculation ran rampant, with theories ranging from market manipulation to tax evasion. Only Jake knew the truth. He had given everything away to protect the woman who still didn't know they weren't related by blood, and the child she carried who would never know its father's name or legacy. 3 weeks later, a gaunt, unrecognizable man applied for a janitor position at McLean Psychiatric Hospital. His references checked out. Jake Miller, maintenance worker, previously employed at Thornton & Pierce Financial. No one connected this hollow-eyed, prematurely aged applicant with the billionaire who had dominated financial news just weeks earlier. Emily remained in treatment, slowly regaining lucidity. The photos that had briefly threatened her dignity had mysteriously disappeared from every corner of the internet, something her doctors attributed to good fortune, but which had cost billions to orchestrate. She still refused all visitors, including Chad Richardson, whose calls had abruptly ceased after discovering the Blackwood fortune had evaporated. Without Emily's wealth by association, she held no further interest for him. On a cold autumn evening, Emily sat in the hospital's day room, staring vacantly through the window. A janitor entered quietly, head down, as he emptied trash bins and mopped the floor. She paid no attention until he approached her corner. "The doctors say you're doing better," Jake said softly, not looking directly at her. "I'm glad." Emily didn't respond, didn't even turn her head. "We're not related, Emily. The DNA test was negative. I've been trying to tell you, but—" He swallowed hard. "I know you need time." Still no response. Jake continued mopping, moving gradually closer. "I've arranged everything for your mother. She'll have the best care for life. And the baby too. There's a trust fund that will provide everything they'll need." Emily finally stirred slightly. "How?" she whispered, voice raspy from disuse. "Does it matter?" Jake kept his eyes on the floor. "I just needed you to know you're free. From Richardson, from financial worries, from me, if that's what you want." He finished cleaning and turned to leave. "Jake?" Her voice was barely audible. "What happened to your suit?" A ghost of a smile touched his lips. "Turns out I'm better suited to a mop than a boardroom anyway." "You gave it up." Understanding dawned slowly through her medication haze. "All of it?" What good is money if you've got no one to share it with? He shrugged, the gesture painfully reminiscent of their early days. Besides, this uniform has always felt more honest. Emily stared at him, this unrecognizable version of the man she'd both loved and feared, who had sacrificed everything yet asked nothing in return. The opposite of every man who had claimed to love her before. Why? She managed, a single syllable, carrying the weight of incomprehension. Because some promises matter more than others, Jake said simply. Like the one you made to your mother about only marrying someone who truly loves you. I figured I'd try to be worthy of that, even if you never choose me. He turned to go, adding softly, I'll be here, cleaning the floors, fixing the lights, for as long as you need to heal. Emily watched him leave, something long frozen beginning to thaw in her chest. She wouldn't call him back. Not yet. The wounds were still too raw, the trauma too fresh. But for the first time since her breakdown, she felt a flicker of what might have been hope, what neither knew. In Sarah Bennett's hospital room, 300 miles away, her eyes had opened briefly that morning. The experimental treatment was working. Against all odds, against all medical expectations, Emily's mother was fighting her way back to consciousness, one neural pathway at a time. A second chance was taking root, nourished by sacrifice neither mother nor daughter yet comprehended. 3 years passed like a slow-healing wound. Emily had been discharged from McLean after 6 months of intensive therapy, moving into a modest apartment in Lexington with her mother, who had defied all medical expectations with her gradual recovery. Sarah Bennett remained wheelchair-bound, her speech halting but improving, cognitive functions returning in fragments like puzzle pieces, slowly reuniting. Jake had kept his word, remaining at McLean as a janitor until Emily's discharge, then enrolling in nursing courses at a community college. Night classes, weekend clinicals, studying between shifts. His transformation from billionaire to healthcare worker unfolded with quiet determination. No one but Emily knew the man who now administered medications and changed bedpans had once commanded boardrooms. Their relationship had rebuilt itself cautiously, brick by brick, first as tentative friendship, then as co-caregivers for Sarah, and finally hesitantly as something deeper. The child, a daughter they named Hope, turned 2 last month, her existence the bridge that had ultimately reunited them when all else might have failed. Today was Mother's Day. Emily placed fresh flowers by the window of their small living room, watching Jake help Sarah with her physical therapy exercises. Her mother's face, once gaunt with illness, had filled out slightly. Though still thin, color had returned to her cheeks, determination to her eyes. Today's the day, Emily whispered to herself, hand moving unconsciously to touch her mother's Bible on the side table. The promise made during what they'd thought were Sarah's final moments, a promise that had guided Emily through the darkest chapters of her life, might finally reach its completion. Jake approached, kissing her cheek, softly. Everything's ready. The chaplain will be here at noon. Emily nodded, emotions tightening her throat. Not the wedding either had once imagined. No cathedral, no designer gown, no society photographers, just family in their modest home with a hospital chaplain Jake had befriended performing the ceremony. She seems stronger today, Emily said, watching her mother. More present. It's like she knows, Jake agreed. This day matters to her as much as to us. The doorbell rang. Not the chaplain, too early. Emily opened the door to find Dr. Levine from McLean, the psychiatrist who had guided her through her darkest days. I hope I'm not intruding, he said, warmly. Jake invited me, said today was special. Emily welcomed him in, grateful for this connection to the place that had both broken and healed her. Other guests arrived gradually. The physical therapist who had worked with Sarah for 2 years, the nurse who had first discovered her mother's identity, Jake's community college instructor, who had recognized extraordinary compassion in her formerly wealthy student, a small gathering of people who had witnessed their journey without ever knowing its fullest depths. At noon, Sarah Bennett was wheeled to the center of the living room, positioned where she could clearly see her daughter and the man who had sacrificed everything to save their family. The chaplain began the simple ceremony as Hope played quietly with blocks at her grandmother's feet. Emily, Jake said when the time came for vows, his voice steady despite the emotion in his eyes. When we met, I was hiding behind a false identity, afraid to be seen for who I really was. You saw me anyway, not the name, not the money, just the person beneath it all. Then I almost lost you through my own dishonesty. He paused, swallowing hard. I've spent 3 years trying to become the man you deserve. I can't promise wealth anymore, but I can promise that every day for the rest of our lives I will choose you, our daughter, and the family we've built, above everything else." Emily blinked back tears, aware of her mother watching intently, seemingly more lucid than she'd been in years. "Jake, when we met, I was broken by grief and isolation. You showed me kindness when I'd forgotten it existed." Her voice trembled slightly. "Then, I almost lost you through fear and distrust. I've spent 3 years learning that real love isn't about perfection. It's about finding someone who stays even when things fall apart." She glanced at her mother. "Someone who rebuilds alongside you, as many times as necessary." Sarah's eyes filled with tears of recognition at her own words, quoted back across the years. As the chaplain pronounced them husband and wife, Sarah suddenly raised her hand, gesturing for attention. The room quieted as she struggled to speak, clearly, something she rarely attempted in front of others due to the difficulty. "Emily," she managed, each word carefully formed, "your promise, you kept it." The room fell completely silent. These were the most coherent words Sarah had spoken since emerging from her vegetative state. Emily knelt before her mother's wheelchair, taking her fragile hands. "You heard me," Emily whispered in realization. "That day in the hospital when I thought you were dying, you heard me swear I'd only marry someone who truly loved me." Sarah nodded slowly, a tear tracking down her cheek. "I held on for this." Something passed between mother and daughter in that moment. Understanding, forgiveness, completion of a circle, begun in grief and fulfilled in hard-won joy. Jake joined them, placing hope gently in Sarah's lap. 4 generations of strength, of survival against impossible odds. Later, as guests departed and evening settled over their small home, Emily found Jake on the back porch, staring at the sunset. "Any regrets?" she asked quietly. "About the money, the name, the life you gave up." Jake shook his head. "Not one. This," he gestured toward their modest home, "is worth more than everything I had before." Inside, Sarah had fallen asleep in her wheelchair, hope curled against her grandmother's legs like a small guardian. The sight brought fresh tears to Emily's eyes. "I used to wonder why my mother made me make that promise," she said softly. "Now I understand. She knew love was the only thing worth having, the only thing that stays when everything else is stripped away." Jake took her hand, the simple gold band on her finger catching the last light of day. "We lost everything to find that out." "Not everything," Emily corrected him. "We lost what didn't matter to keep what did." As night fell on Mother's Day, the promise made years before in a hospital room of grief had found its fulfillment in a small house filled with hard-won joy. The journey had broken them completely, then forged something stronger from the pieces, a family built not on wealth or status, but on the kind of love that survives the unthinkable, and in that survival lay their greatest victory. If this story touched your heart, please consider subscribing to our channel and turning on notifications. Your support allows us to continue sharing these emotional journeys that remind us of our shared humanity. And don't forget to click on the video appearing on your screen now. The pastor stops the wedding after noticing something strange about the bride for another compelling story that will move you deeply. Thank you for joining us on this emotional journey. Until next time, remember that sometimes the most beautiful beginnings emerge from our most painful endings.